talk about points in the plane. Very good. So remember that we start talking about real line. Real line, which includes our values, some negative values, some positive values, just as a representation. But as you remember, it includes all rational numbers and irrational numbers. So all values on this line are called real values or real numbers. So it only has one dimension. We only can represent one numerical value. We're going to introduce two-dimensional space. So this is one dimension. Two-dimensional space has X, and also it has Y-axis. X-axis and Y-axis. It has two dimensions. We call this guy Cartesian XY or rectangular plane. XY plane, rectangular plane or Cartesian plane. It helps us to locate different points. So we can identify different points in this plane. Every point has X value and also it has Y values. We represent this by X coordinate and also Y coordinate. Very good. So for example, suppose I ask you to plot the following points. Okay, the very first point is 1 and 2. The second point is -1 and 2. Then I give you -1 and -2, and finally 1 and -2. So I ask you to plot these 4 points. Okay, we're going to say that, hey, I have X and Y. So I need the XY plane or rectangular plane or Cartesian plane. I need to have X-axis and also Y-axis. Just note that these two lines that are perpendicular together divide up a plane into 4 sections. The very first point is 1 and 2. So you have 1, you have 2, you have 3, just some values for scaling -1, -2, -3, -1, -2, and -2. The very first point, 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 units up. As you can notice, both X and Y are positive here. We call this little section that has positive X and positive Y the first quadrant. So this is called the first quadrant. In the first quadrant, everything is positive. X is positive, Y is positive. Let's graph the second point. So we're done with the first point. Let's graph the second point. Our second point is -1 and 2. My X is -1 and my Y is 2 units up here. So let me just shift this a little bit over here so you have symmetry all over it. So suppose you have your -1 here, -2 here, and then -3 goes down a little bit here. So here, -1 and 2, this point is identified by -1 and 2. Note that your X is negative and your Y is positive. So X is negative, but Y is positive. We call this section the second quadrant. Well, what about the next point? My next point is -1 and -2. -1 and 2 units down. So -1 and -2. Well, note that x is negative, y is negative. We call this part of the plane the third quadrant. And finally, the last point, 1 and -2. Use a different color. 1 and -2. 1 and 2 units down. As you can see, your x is positive and your y is negative. We call this piece of plane the fourth quadrant. Perfect. Very good.